If you dug a clean square foot out of your raised bed today, 12 inches deep, and counted every earthworm you found, what number would you expect? Most gardeners guess something cheerful. 20, maybe 30. But the honest answer for most raised beds in America right now is closer to 2 or 3, sometimes 0. And the truly uncomfortable part is that this is not your fault. The soil mix you bought was probably heat-treated. The compost you added was screened. The bag did not come with a worm in it. You built a beautiful container of dirt, and you handed it to no one. Here is what makes this worth your next 12 minutes. There is a way to fix that problem in a single day. Not by buying worms online, not by digging up your neighbor's yard, by using a method so simple that traditional farmers were doing versions of it for centuries, and so quietly inconvenient to modern industrial agriculture that you have probably never heard a single garden center employee mention it. The science behind it is real and peer-reviewed. The method costs nothing. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the soil under your tomatoes is not living up to its job, and exactly what to do about it. Let us start with what is actually happening underground in a healthy soil, because most gardeners have a vague sense that earthworms are good without ever being told what they actually do. And what they do is genuinely extraordinary. A single active earthworm processes its own body weight in soil and organic matter every single day. It eats, it moves, it excretes. And the stuff that comes out the other end is not just digested dirt. It is one of the richest natural fertilizers ever measured. A 2019 meta-analysis published in Geoderma pulled together 405 separate observations from 81 studies on every continent except Antarctica. The researchers compared the nutrient content of earthworm castings to the surrounding soil they came from. The castings contained 40 to 48% more total nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic carbon. Pretty good. But here is where it gets dramatic. The plant-available form of nitrogen, the form your tomato roots can actually drink, was 241% higher in the castings than in the surrounding soil. The available phosphorus was 84% higher. The pH was half a unit closer to neutral. The cation exchange capacity, which is just a fancy way of saying how well the soil holds onto nutrients, was 40% higher. A single worm. Doing this every day, for a year. Now, multiply that. A healthy garden soil can support around 25 worms per square foot in the top 12 inches. Across an acre, that adds up to roughly 1 million worms. 1 million worms processing soil at body weight per day produces around 100 tons of castings annually. That is a 2/3 of an inch thick layer of pure fertilizer, distributed perfectly through the root zone every year for free. The United States Department of Agriculture ran a test on a silt loam soil with no worms. Water infiltration was around 0.2 of an inch per minute. They added worms. After just 1 month, infiltration had jumped to 0.9 of an inch per minute. A 350% improvement in 30 days with no equipment. And the deep burrowing species, the ones called night crawlers or anisic worms in the scientific literature, build vertical tunnels that can reach 2 meters straight down. These tunnels are semi-permanent. Researchers tracking earthworm burrows in northern forests using time-lapse photography have documented the same Lumbricus terrestris burrow being used continuously for 7 years by successive generations. 1 million such burrows per acre is the practical drainage equivalent of 4,000 feet of installed drain tile. At standard installation pricing, that is about $4,800 worth of drainage infrastructure, built underground by animals you do not pay, using fuel they harvest themselves. This is why the numbers around earthworms and crop yields are so striking. A 2014 meta-analysis of 58 separate studies stretching back to 1910 found that the simple presence of earthworms increases crop yields by an average of 25%. 25%. A 2023 study went further and estimated that, globally, earthworms contribute to about 6.5% of all grain production on the planet. That is 140 million metric tons of food per year. If earthworms were a country, they would rank with Russia or Brazil as a top 5 grain-producing nation. They feed roughly the same number of people as the entire agricultural output of either of those countries. So here is the obvious question. If earthworms produce that much fertilizer, that much drainage, and that much yield, all for free, why does industrial agriculture not protect them like a national treasure? This is where the story gets a little dark and a lot more interesting, because the practices that define modern industrial farming are, almost without exception, the practices that destroy earthworm populations. A 2017 meta-analysis of 215 field studies across 40 countries, going back to 1950, found that conventional plowing causes a systematic decline in earthworm populations. Some soils need more than 10 years of stopped tillage just to recover. Glyphosate, the active ingredient in the most widely sold herbicide on Earth, was shown in a 2015 greenhouse study to reduce earthworm reproduction by 56% in the species most common to farmland. In the same study, the surface casting activity of night crawlers almost completely stopped within 3 weeks of a single application. And once the worms stopped working, soil nitrate levels in the test plots jumped by 1,592%, because nothing was cycling that nitrogen anymore, and most of it just leached toward the groundwater. Synthetic ammonium-based fertilizers are no better. The park grass experiment at Rothamsted Research in England has been running continuously since 1856. It is one of the longest-running agricultural experiments in human history. The data is unambiguous. The higher the dose of synthetic nitrogen applied to a plot, the lower the earthworm population in that plot. The mechanism is straightforward. Synthetic nitrogen acidifies soil over time, and earthworms struggle to survive below a pH of about 5. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Industrial agriculture sells a yield boost, and earthworms also produce a yield boost. The boost from earthworms disappears the moment you flood the soil with synthetic nitrogen because there is nothing left for them to release. And the more synthetic nitrogen you apply, the fewer earthworms survive to compete with that product the following year. It is not malice, it is just business. Healthy worm populations and the synthetic input industry are economic substitutes. The soil cannot have both, but your raised bed can. If you are still watching, you are exactly the kind of gardener this method was made for. I would love it if you hit subscribe before we get into how to actually do it. This channel digs into the real science of garden soil every single week. Now let us talk about the forgotten method itself, because it is genuinely much simpler than you would expect. The science behind it was nailed down in a 2011 study published in PLOS One by Zerbees and colleagues. They wanted to understand how earthworms actually find their food underground, and they discovered something remarkable. Earthworms detect food primarily by smell. Specifically, they detect volatile chemical compounds emitted by the soil fungi and bacteria that colonize decomposing organic matter. 2 of those compounds were identified by name: ethyl pentanoate and ethyl hexanoate. The researchers then put earthworms at the bottom of a vertical soil tube and placed those compounds at the top. The worms moved up through the soil toward the chemical signal, through 25 centimeters of soil within 24 hours, and through a full meter within 65 hours. So here is how you trigger that response in your raised bed. You take a handful of partially decomposed organic matter. Not fresh kitchen scraps, the good stuff. Aged compost, a handful of broken down leaves, coffee grounds that have been sitting wet for a week, anything that is already humming with fungal and bacterial activity. You dig a small trench in your bed, around 4 to 6 inches deep. You place the organic matter in. You cover it with soil. You water it lightly to keep the chemical signal moving through the moisture in the soil profile. And you wait. If there are earthworms anywhere within roughly 5 meters of your bed, in the surrounding lawn, in your neighbor's flower border, in the wild patch by the fence, they will detect that signal and start moving toward it. Lumbricus terrestris, the common nightcrawler, has been measured by automated infrared cameras traveling up to 19.5 meters in a single night when motivated by a strong food signal. By tomorrow morning, you will have visitors. Lift the soil over your buried compost in 2 or 3 days, and you will find them clustered around it. If you want a more permanent version of the same idea, build a worm tower. Take a 5-gallon bucket. Drill perforations all over the lower 2/3 of the bucket. Bury the bucket in the center of your raised bed, with about 1/3 of it sticking up above the soil surface. Put a lid on top. Then fill it with kitchen scraps and shredded cardboard. Worms enter through the holes, feed inside the tower, exit through the holes, and deposit their nutrient-rich castings throughout the surrounding bed. One tower covers about 4 square meters of growing space. Permaculture gardeners have been doing this for over 20 years, and the underlying mechanism, chemical attraction by volatile compounds, is exactly the same as the buried compost method. A third option, even simpler, is the cardboard trick. Lay a flat sheet of plain brown cardboard directly on your bed soil. Wet it down. Leave it overnight. The cardboard maintains constant moisture, blocks light, stabilizes temperature, and feeds the soil fungi that earthworms love to eat. Lift the cardboard the next day, and you will see them. This works as a fast diagnostic to find out whether your bed has any worms at all, and as an attraction tool to concentrate them in one area for relocation. Now here is the honest part, because this channel does not lie to you. 24 hours can attract worms. 24 hours cannot build a population. If your raised bed is biologically dead, with no worms in the surrounding soil at all, you will need to pair these methods with a small starter culture. Grab a few handfuls of soil with visible worms from a healthy garden patch. Bury them with their original soil near your buried compost or worm tower and let them establish. From there, the math is on your side. A single pair of garden earthworms in good conditions produces 20 to 30 cocoons per year. Penn State Extension has documented that, in a previously empty environment, earthworm populations can increase 80-fold within just 4 years. 80-fold, from a starting point of almost nothing, in 4 growing seasons, without buying anything. So, if you have a raised bed that has been struggling, that drains poorly, that produces less than it should, and you have always assumed that was just how raised beds work after a few years, this is the missing piece. The soil under your plants was always meant to be alive, mixing itself, draining itself, fertilizing itself. Industrial agriculture cannot afford to admit that because the entire model depends on selling you the inputs that would otherwise be free. Your raised bed has no such constraint. Bury some compost this weekend. Lay a sheet of cardboard. Build a worm tower. By next month, your soil will be doing work it has not done in years. By next season, it will not need you nearly as much as it does today. That is the forgotten method. That is the science. That is what they would rather you did not know. Now you do.